My name is Madison Clarke. I was 39 the night my parents came pounding on my front door in Austin like they had any right to demand something from me again. 22 years earlier, they had shut a different door, the one on my childhood home, and left me on the porch with a duffel bag, a trembling positive pregnancy test, and a sentence I thought would never stop echoing. You are a disgrace. That bruise never fully faded, but it hardened into something useful. It taught me how to build from nothing. When Elaine and Richard Clarke knocked on my door that humid evening, the sound landed in my chest like a fossil awakening. Their fists were loud enough to wake the neighbors. Their entitlement was louder still. I opened the door with calm on my face and turmoil coiled under my ribs. They expected tears, apologies, supplication. They expected the prodigal daughter to beg for forgiveness. "Let us see the child," my mother demanded, voice thin and precise. Her cruelty had always been surgical, measured, and efficient. Richard stood behind her like a man used to getting what he wanted. He adjusted his watch with an air of practiced impatience. I let them stand on my porch and breathe the cicada air for a long, deliberate moment. I watched my reflection in the glass behind them, steady, unashamed. Rage coiled inside me, but my hand did not tremble. "What child?" I asked calmly. "What are you talking about?" Their faces drained of color. The mirror between us showed a crack in their armor for the first time. Richard tried to form words. "Madison, you can't," and the sentence fell apart in his throat. I refused to play their scene. I refused to let them choreograph the next chapter of my life from my stoop. I had spent my 20s and 30s building a life they had neither funded nor deserved to share. Tonight was not about reconciliation. It was about the truth they had refused to face for 22 years. Abandoning someone did not grant you retroactive rights over whatever they built afterwards. I remembered the night they turned me out like it was carved into my bones. Dad's voice had been low and precise. "You have ruined the Clarke name," he had said, as if that were a punishment that could be measured on a ledger. Mom had not raised her voice. She had tilted her head and examined her nails as if the neatness of her manicure mattered more than her daughter's future. 10 minutes to pack. The family portrait turned face down on the mantel, a small, brutal gesture that felt like a judge's sentence. I stuffed what I could into a duffel, grabbed a few bills I'd hidden, and snatched the locket my grandmother had given me. I walked out into the Texas night with more fear than hope. Dylan Harper, the boy who had whispered forever under the gymnasium lights, evaporated into excuses and a blocked number. His family's attorney sent a letter denying responsibility. His scholarship mattered to them more than I mattered to him. His silence was another betrayal. For a while, Austin was a city of hard edges. I slept on benches in Zilker Park, the humid air clinging to my skin while I rationed tears. Desperation sharpened me in ways I could not have predicted. It made me small and cunning. It taught me which doors opened and which slammed. One morning, shivering under a live oak, a woman in a cashmere coat and a sensible bun stopped beside my bench. Her name was Evelyn Cross. She had a Labrador at her side and eyes that had seen storms and knew how to navigate them. She did not ask for my story. She asked if I wanted breakfast. The way into her world began with coffee and a spare room at one of her hotels. Evelyn was a retired hospitality magnate, sharp, guarded, and generous only to those she chose. She did not coddle me. She put me to work as a hostess, and as I learned to tie napkins and memorize guest names, she taught me the real curriculum: patience, observation, and strategy. "Build so well," she said the first week, her voice low and hard as rock, "that they're ashamed they ever let you go." Evelyn pushed me up the ladder when I showed grit. I rose from hostess to front desk manager, then to director of operations. I tracked inefficiencies no one else saw. I negotiated better vendor contracts. I learned to spot profit leaks before they yawned into losses. Business was a ledger. Control was a balance sheet. I began to understand capital more deeply, where it hid, how it moved, who assumed it would always be there. Evelyn had a small circle of professionals who would become my backbone. Mark Bennett was a lawyer with a face like a closed book. He taught me trusts and protections, the legal architectures that could shield a life from predatory hands. Tara Nguyen, a quick-witted IT specialist with a talent for digital forensics, taught me to read browser histories and trace communications like a detective. Those skills felt like armor. We were not family by blood. We were family by chosen allegiance. There were days the life I was building felt fragile. I miscarried in a clinic that smelled of antiseptic and grief. Evelyn did not allow me to dissolve into silence. She brought soup and a quiet presence and said simply, "This does not end your story. It changes it." In the months that followed, she guided me through adoption procedures. Mark drafted the paperwork that turned a fragile dream into a legal certainty, and Tara made sure our digital tracks stayed where we wanted them. I found a small, fierce boy in a foster home who looked at me with curious eyes. I named him Logan, after the street where I had once slept, a reclamation of the geography that had once been harsh. I raised him carefully and deliberately. I enrolled him in coding camps and math clubs. When he was 8, he built a scheduling app to help my hotel's staff avoid double bookings. When he was 10, a local tech blog wrote a short piece about the kid who made a hotel more efficient. The wins were real, but I staged them so the right people would notice. Visibility invited patrons. Patrons opened doors. Evelyn taught patience like a craft. "Revenge without structure is just heat," she said. "Build something that makes their cruelty look petty." So I built. I studied, invested, learned to create the ironclad legal scaffolding that Mark drafted, and to watch the wide web with Tara's tools. Every small victory was deliberate. A local article about Logan's algorithm here, a quiet dinner with an incubator there, a warm email that put him on someone's radar. I was building a life that would be hard to exploit. I let them believe I was smaller than I was. I let invisibility be a cloak while I worked. That allowed me to plan. When, years later, a bouquet arrived at Logan's college showcase and a sleek tablet appeared on my desk with a card that said, "For our talented grandson, time to reconnect," I did not rush. I boxed the tablet and wrote a brief note. "This brings back too many painful memories. Please do not contact me again." I made my handwriting tremble on purpose when I mailed it, a staged fragility to bait their hunger. The knocks on my door that humid evening were thus predictable. Their entitlement, however, had its limits. Standing on my porch with them before me, I did not think about the past so much as the slow work that had brought Logan and me from survival to safety. The door closed behind them that night, and for the first time indicated the relief I felt was not fragile. The work had only just begun. Evelyn always said fortunes collapse not because someone shouted louder, but because someone quietly removed the keystone. So I worked in the quiet hours, before the city woke, after the night staff clocked out. I laid foundations no one could see. I started humbly, folding napkins, learning guest names, remembering anniversaries so servers could surprise couples. Hospitality taught me pattern recognition, the clenched jaw that meant a lawsuit waiting to happen, the flattered sigh that meant a tip. I used those lessons to find margins others missed, and to build loyalty programs that felt personal and unassailable. Evelyn watched and then pushed. Promotions followed, and with each new role, I learned how capital moved. Mark Bennett taught me legal architecture, trusts, irrevocable vehicles, clauses that turned sentiment into statute. He wrote like a mason carving stone. Precise, final. "Irrevocable trusts are like dead trees," he said once, tapping a legal pad. "You can't grow in them, but you can build an oak around them that will last centuries." He showed me how to protect an adopted child in law and how to construct remainders that diverted funds to charity if beneficiaries resorted to predatory litigation. Mark's work became the vault for Logan's future. Tara taught me the invisible battlefield. She could restore deleted files as if she'd pulled them out of the air. She taught me how every search left fingerprints and how to map digital trails that people thought had vanished. "People leak themselves," she said with a smile. "You only need to know where to look." She set monitors to ping on certain phrases. Every scraped search query and every IP trace became a piece of evidence waiting in a file. Together, the four of us, Evelyn, Mark, Tara, and I, formed a chosen family that understood leverage. We did not stand on bloodlines. We stood on strategy. Logan became our light. He had a mind made to take a puzzle apart and reassemble it better. At 9, he coded an app to coordinate room service. At 12, that app cut kitchen waste. A small local blog wrote a humanizing piece about the hotel kid who fixed a recurring problem. The piece drew attention from an incubator. The incubator led to a feature that built momentum. Once momentum began, it fed itself. That's how reputation worked. I did not manufacture Logan's talent. I positioned it so it could not be ignored. Investors looked up, mentors made connections, and Logan, who loved the work more than the attention, accepted invitations to present. Each success was genuine, but I made sure it landed where it would matter. Predictability is often a trap, but it can be a tool. When the Clarks first tried to reinsert themselves into Logan's orbit, they were clumsy and obvious. A bouquet at a showcase, a card with no signature, a tablet left on my desk, small gestures of a larger hunger. Tara traced the florist's order to a Clark-linked credit line. The card's paper had a watermark that led to a printer in their neighborhood. I saved everything. I returned the tablet with a note designed to look frail. This brings back too many painful memories. Please do not contact me again. I let my voice tremble when they phoned, and Tara recorded it. Their greed sharpened. Their searches escalated into something ugly. Grandparent rights in Texas, how to reclaim an adopted child, and inheritance of estranged families.
Tara captured screenshots.
Mark filed them. Dylan reappeared, older and greedy, his messages sloppy with entitlement. He wrote about pressure points and a small settlement to cover everyone. Richard and Elaine encouraged him. I kept silent. Evelyn told me, "Silence is a blade, Madison." She was right. I let my apparent vulnerability draw them toward making mistakes. We constructed a legal architecture that made coercion fail. Mark drafted an irrevocable trust naming Logan the primary beneficiary of his work's proceeds. He inserted a clause disinheriting any biological relative who had abandoned the child. To make attempts at coercion self-defeating, he added a punitive remainder. Any frivolous suit or exploitative legal gambit would trigger redistribution of contested funds to a foundation supporting women and disadvantaged youth. In effect, the more they tried to weaponize family ties, the more they would fund a cause that countered their behavior. We also planted small baits. I let a rumor leak, carefully and anonymously, that Logan's latest prototype could be worth millions if properly scaled. The whisper reached the Clarke network. Gifts and messages began to arrive. Each item served to confirm their interest and to draw them closer to showing their hand. Their tactics grew blunter. A panicked email to Dylan revealed everything. An embarrassed call to a family attorney used language so candid. Get us access, we deserve a share. That Tara flagged it as coercive. Mark smiled and told me, they're making their own paper trail. That was the moment I had been preparing for. They filed suit faster than I expected. Petitions for grandparent visitation and claims to a share of potential earnings coyly dressed as concern for the family. Their lawyer invoked family bonds and the child's best interests. Tara and Mark had already archived their searches, their emails, and Dylan's messages. Their filings were sloppy, revealing motivation more than right. When the courthouse date arrived, I felt a cold, steady readiness rather than dread. Mark's briefs were tight. Tara's digital dossier was exhaustive. Evelyn had made discreet calls to influencers who championed truth. We were prepared not just to defend, but to expose. But one final piece required public theater, a stage big enough that their vanity could not hide the rot underneath. We needed a bright, undeniable spotlight. I booked Logan a speaking slot at the Austin Tech Summit. He would present a polished demo. Evelyn would offer a short tribute about chosen family. Mark and Tara would coordinate legal and digital safety. Then we baited. Invitations went to the Clarks, who received a tasteful card inviting them to a celebration of innovation and the next generation. They saw a path back. They took it. In the nights leading up to the summit, I checked and rechecked every detail. The empire I had built in the shadows was ready to move into the light. Logan's future and our safety depended on this moment. The Austin Tech Summit was a stage built for truth. The convention center's atrium was filled with morning light. Seats were packed with people who lived to spot talent early. Cameras hung from booms like hawks. I had rehearsed the moment 1,000 times, careful to keep it spare, factual, and undeniable. Logan was calmer than I felt. He had practiced his demo until every line of code felt like a sentence in a speech. I watched him straighten his jacket in the green room and saw the same resolve I'd seen in the mirror the night I opened my parents' door. He looked at me, I nodded. He stepped onto the stage. His presentation went perfectly. He spoke about optimization and efficiency, how software could help small businesses do more with less. The demo performed flawlessly. Questions shifted from polite to eager as people realized this was a serious product with market potential. Cameras flashed. Investors scribbled. At the end of the segment, Evelyn walked to the mic and spoke without platitudes. "Family is what you build," she said. "We are here to celebrate innovation, responsibility, and the people who support our next generation." The emphasis was visible. The cameras caught it. Everyone felt the direction of her words. That was my cue. Mark took the podium next, not legalese, but a quiet chronology. He described the timeline of my parents' attempts to reinsert themselves, anonymous gifts, cards, then the legal maneuvering intended to claim rights and leverage. As he spoke, the screen behind him filled with carefully redacted screenshots. Dylan's messages about a settlement split, Elaine's searches for grandparent rights Texas, invoices for a PR campaign designed to generate pity. Tara's timestamp captures displayed each piece, with source and date. The murmurs rose into a hum. The Clarkes' faces, visible to cameras in the front row, went pale. They had walked into a mirror instead of a welcome. Mark presented key documents, a text from Dylan about expecting a split, intercepted calls of Richard and Dylan trading get a piece, language, and emails showing Elaine buying sympathetic press. He had Tara's transcriptions and time-stamped archives. It was not sensationalism. It was ordinary, damning evidence. Logan, standing slightly behind me, did not stare at the Clarkes. He spoke to the crowd, investors, journalists, mentors, about the family he believed in, one built by choice and respect, not opportunism. Then, he completed his demo. The applause was real. When the moderator opened for questions, a journalist asked, "Madison, how do you respond to claims you kept this child from his grandparents?" I felt a tightness for a beat, and then spoke plainly. "I raised my son alone," I said. "My parents abandoned me when I was a child. When their interest returned, it was not to reconcile but to profit. The documents we have shared are not vindictive, they are evidence." The summit feed hit social platforms within minutes. Clips trended. Overnight, HT The Story went viral. But the public spectacle was only part of the strategy. Mark had already filed motions and supplied the intercepted materials to the court. A lawsuit that had sought visitation rights and a share in potential earnings suddenly read as what it was, an opportunistic grab. Within 48 hours, your attorneys for the plaintiffs began to pull back. Elaine's PR firm tried to spin a narrative of family healing, but Tara's analysis showed their campaign had been paid for by a Clarke account. Commentators framed it as entitlement exposed. Sponsors and clients of Richard's small advisory firm began receiving difficult questions. The trickle became a flood. Legal consequences followed. The judge handling the case issued an order for independent review of the plaintiff's motivations and flagged the filing for potential sanctions as frivolous. That was formal language for a public rebuke. The practical outcome was harsher. Richard's reputation eroded. Clients distanced themselves. A major contract was wasted, citing reputational concerns and conflicts. Richard stepped back from his chairmanship pending inquiry. Dylan's world collapsed faster. Tara had archived his cloud messages in which he discussed pressure points and expected splits. Mark handed those files to an accountant who found discrepancies and alerted an auditor. Within Dylan faced a federal audit that exposed undeclared income and questionable transactions. The fallout was swift: legal headaches, reputational ruin, and a vanishing of supposed leverage. Elaine's social world crumbled. Her charity gala lost donors once the paid PR campaign was exposed. The influencer's post, which she had commissioned, was called out as purchase sympathy. Her carefully curated life showed brittle seams. She sold the Austin house at a loss and moved to a compact condo across the state line. Their social circle shrank as neighbors whispered. Their small real estate advisory firm lost clients. A senior board member questioned conflicts of interest. The family name, once trusted in certain circles, now carried a stain. I did not gloat at their downfall. My satisfaction was quiet and rational. The objective had been to protect Logan, to disarm those who would exploit him. The legal protections Mark had written and the digital archives Tara had built made their opportunism self-defeating. When the judge denied their petition and admonished their counsel for the weak basis of the claim, the court's decision came with a public scolding. The matter was referred for further investigation, at Mark's suggestion, into the plaintiff's corporate and financial maneuvers. The press framed the story bluntly: entitlement exposed, opportunists unmasked. The narrative shifted irrevocably away from the Clarkes. I directed none of the money toward vengeance. Instead, I followed Evelyn's dream. I funded a foundation in Logan's name focused on women who had been abandoned by family and on coding camps for underprivileged kids. The foundation launched quietly. Its first grant was small but meaningful, a local job training program for single mothers. We announced that any funds recovered through legal processes would go to the foundation. It was a structural answer to structural cruelty. People asked if I felt vindictive. There was a cold sweetness in seeing arrogant faces fold, but I told interviewers the truth. I wanted safety for my son, accountability for those who would harm him, and resources for others who had no second chance. I wanted to turn the architecture of cruelty into tools for resilience. There were other consequences. Dylan negotiated a plea on tax evasion charges and retreated from public life. My parents, who had been pillars of a social network that valued their hospitality, watched invitations dwindle and scrutiny grow. Their world narrowed. They had to reckon with reputations that money and connections could not readily repair. Logan's life opened. Investors who had watched his summit talk reached out offering mentorship, internships, and modest seed funding. He remained the same curious, intense boy who loved code, but doors that had been locked now opened. A small fund committed to his project, and a seasoned entrepreneur offered to advise. He treated each opportunity as a problem to solve, not as a ticket to fame. In the evening, the foundation signed its first partnership, and Mark and I sat on the back steps of Evelyn's guest house, the city lights winking across the river. Our relationship had grown from professional to a quiet companionship. He took my hand without drama.
"You did it," he said.
"We did it," I corrected. I thought of the porch where my parents had once pounded and of the bench in Zilker Park where I had swallowed shame and hunger. I remembered the miscarriage and the nights of doubt, and the small boy who reached for my hand despite everything. I had built a life not to prove them wrong, but to ensure they could never harm us again. That night, the whisperer had repeated the line I had repeated as a creed: "Build so well that they are ashamed they ever let you go." Logan slept 2 doors down, dreaming of code and a future that would not be defined by the cruelty of others. They had tried to erase me. Instead, I carved my name into history.